All right. I think it's go time. Got good levels. Let's do this. Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to the stream. I hope y'all are having a great day. We are going to be doing this as a YouTube video / live stream. So we do have our chat going up on the side. There is quite a bit of lag. So if y'all are just now joining the channel, make sure and drop me a comment in there and just let me know that you're here. That way I can talk to you guys because we got a lot to talk about tonight. It is CES 2021 and you know, it's going to be my first CES, and it's a completely different year than it usually is. Usually it's based out of Las Vegas, Nevada, and it's a huge, you know, hullabaloo with people running around everywhere. The show floor is going on. I think the first day is even called Media Day, and I was expecting on being there this year, but, you know, with all the pandemic stuff going on, you know, CES decided to make everything digital this year. So rather than getting dressed up, getting my press badge on and all that stuff, I'm actually not doing that. I did everything from home today. So I'm still here at the house at the Turk compound. And today we got to watch a few different keynote addresses today. We watched the Panasonic one earlier this morning, and we also saw the TCL keynote speeches earlier in the morning. We can talk about those later in the stream tonight. But then I got thrown a curveball right around 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. I saw the post by Tom's Hardware saying Intel keynote is at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And I'm looking at my clock and I'm like, holy crap, that's like in 20 minutes. So I got all my stuff ready to go. And basically, I was planning on the Intel keynote being tomorrow. That's what the CES timeline says. And sure enough, I got in there, got the video. I think I was one of the first 300, 400 people to actually watch the video. So still got lots of new information out of the deal. And we got a whole bunch of new information regarding laptops. They've got the new V Pro versions going out with all their new business lines of laptops. And they've got like this Evo V Pro different piece of software for those that are doing that kind of stuff. But guys, we don't talk laptops too often here on the channel. We are more worried about desktops and other kinds of technology. So whenever it got towards the end of the press conference with the Intel CEO, it might have been just their marketing director. I forget who it was. They finally started dropping a couple of the bombshells for the latest Intel Rocket Lake S CPUs, also known as the 11th gen processors. And we really only saw a single SKU from that lineup, and that is the 11900K, which is comparable to the 10900K. If y'all have checked out the channel before, I have done a review of the 10700K, and we'll be talking about that processor quite a bit tonight. But basically, going from the 10th gen to the 11th gen, Intel kind of had to figure a few things out with how they're going to squeeze more performance in while still trying to keep up at this point with AMD with their different lineup that they've got. Because let's be honest, guys, the Ryzen 5000 series processors, they are awesome. You know, we've done the 5900X review. We've made simulated 5800s and 5600Xs, done all sorts of streaming and stuff. But guys, it's now time for Intel to throw their weight into the game. And we've got ourselves some 11th gen stuff to talk about. So let's slap on this screen. So we've got our desktop here. This is our streaming testing PC that we do all our benchmarking on. And I've just got a couple notes here on the left. I'll make sure to write some time codes down at the bottom for anyone that's going to be chiming into this video at another time. That way you can keep up with the conversation because we are streaming this live right now. There is quite a bit of lag with the chat. So just keep that in mind if things are going on. It's saying that we should lower the bit rate. Nope, we're going to keep the bit rate as it is because we're not dropping any frames or anything, so everything's good. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of the highlights of what we saw with the keynote speech from Intel, and then we'll start to dive through some of the lower level details coming in through the different articles we've been reading. You know, we watched a couple videos about the Intel 11th gen release as well as the Z490 or Z590, excuse me, motherboard announcement. There's still not a lot of official information about some of this stuff, but we have gotten quite a bit of leaks, and there's actually quite a bit of information out on the internet regarding these parts. So without further ado, let's jump in. So I'm going to be basing a lot of my lower level information off of this Tom's Hardware article. I've written it with Tom's in the past, and Paul Alcorn is over in, well, I guess he's not in it because it's a virtual event this year, but he is covering the boots on the ground approach for Tom's Hardware, and he's their CPU reviewer. And pardon the background noise, we do have the heater kicking on because it's actually snowed here in Texas yesterday. But let's talk about the i9-11900k. So we saw towards the end of the video that they are going to be rocking the 11900K is going to have 8 cores and 16 threads. It's going to be based off of their 14 nanometer node, and it's going to have a 2-core boost clock of 5.3 gigahertz, and stock all-core clock speeds are going to be right at 4.8 gigahertz, which I think if you go and actually look at the 10900K versus this, the frequencies kind of match up. There might be, you know, an extra 100 megahertz or so, but for the most part, these parts look identical from a frequency perspective. The big asterisk here is, of course, we are losing 2 cores. We'll talk about that more in just a bit, and it's kind of a weird omission, you know. There's two fewer cores. It's going to be about the same clock speed, so it's like, why would you pick up this new processor? Well, stick around. We're going to talk about that here shortly. A couple other important improvements that are going into this processor are going to be the introduction of DDR4 3200. You know, people have told me quite a few times, Turk, why are you running your Intel parts at such slow speeds? Officially, Intel has only started supporting like 2933 and stuff in recent years. So them finally going up to 3200 on the data rate for the memory interface is actually getting them on parity on paper with AMD systems, which is a huge benefit for anyone that's going to be just doing stock clock speeds without like an overclocked XMP profile. I guess you could still use an XMP profile, but like if you're going to be going with the lower end 500 series chipsets, you're going to be now being able to get to the higher base clock speed right out of the box. So that's a huge benefit for everybody across the board, and I find it really nice to have the faster memory standardly supported. So moving on along, the next huge improvement, PCIe Gen 4. Finally, all the major mass-marketed processors on the market are going to be having Gen 4 capabilities. So if you're getting yourself an RTX 3080, if you've got either the last generation AMD GPUs or the current generation GPUs, you'll be able to utilize the full bandwidth capacity of those graphics cards, which is super nice, really good to see there. Another big benefit, this is going to have 20 lanes of PCIe, which is, I think, 4 additional lanes. So you'll now be able to have your entire single GPU, 16X GPU allocated at Gen 4, as well as a single NVMe drive that has Gen 4 by 4 lanes. So if you've got yourself one of these bad boys, this is the Sabrent Rocket. This is the 4th Gen 1. I've got some testing coming up on the channel with this. We're going to be seeing what direct storage has in store for us going into the future. But anyways, all of these new processors are going to have this added benefit of having all these new interfaces and all that stuff. But there's some catches here, and we'll talk about it here when we get to the motherboard comparabilities. A couple other things to talk about first is we're also going to be getting some USB 3.2 Gen 2 by 2. That's going to be included with the chipset. I know there's some talks about having some more additional Gen 4 USB or stuff. I haven't gotten a lot of that information. I got some links down in the description if y'all want to dig deeper into what the individual chipsets have. But what's cool here is we're getting expanded I/O, faster I/O, as well as finally we're at parity with some of the desktop CPUs from AMD. So let's talk about, I think that's what this next one is. Nope, that's performance. So let's talk about the motherboards, and this is the Z490 versus the Z590. If you check the channel out before, I've done the 10700K review. I've also done the Asus ROG Gaming Strix E Wi-Fi board. I got it over there on the back on the test wall there. But basically, there's not much has changed going between the Z490 versus the Z590 from a motherboard's perspective. but they do have to take into account some of the changes with the newer processors, and that's going to be forcing some compatibility things to keep in mind going forward. So they're going to be upgrading with the 11th gen processors, going from DMI 2.0 to DMI 3.0, and that's going to be actually doubling the effective bandwidth of that interface between the chip and the PCH, the platform controller hub. I think it's like 7.9 gigahertz. Let me see what the DMI, yeah, 7.86 gigabytes per second. So that's really awesome. They're going to get better speeds going between the chip and the PCH. But the problem here is that by doing that, they're actually doubling the lane width of the interface. So what's going to happen is there's going to be some compatibility issues, and we'll talk about that more. Actually, we'll just go and talk about it now. There's going to be some compatibility issues with these processors and the latest or previous generation motherboards, because if you're pinning out the bottom of the processor with wider lane lengths, some of the pins you've allocated previously no longer are going to be wired out directly to it. So what's going to happen is, do I have a good picture of that? Maybe he does in this article. Nope. I'm referencing the Tom's Hardware article here. Link down in the description if you want to check that out. Yep, I don't have it on here. But basically, on the previous generation processors, you're going to have 4 lanes coming out. And if you plug an older part into the newer motherboard, it'll still be compatible, but you won't be able to utilize all of the links that are going to be enabled by the DMI 3.0. But if you take a new processor and put it into an older motherboard, that will still work as well, but you will only get half the bandwidth as well, because remember, we don't have as many wires coming out of the processor to the PCH for that DMI connectivity. So you are going to get half bandwidth when you go from 11th gen processors to the Z490 motherboards. So we will have to test that out once we get our hands on some of these newer processors. I don't imagine it'll be too much performance impact, but it is something to keep in mind if you're going to be buying a brand new system or trying to upgrade a new system. One thing that to keep in mind, though, is if you're taking a new processor, the 11th series generation processors, and putting them into a Z490 motherboard, you should be able to get Gen 4 PCIe out of it as long as your motherboard is certified or verified to support those speeds, because it's going to be a direct connection from the processor to the endpoint device. So you don't have to worry about the other, like PCH, being compatible with the Gen 4. But you will have to worry about if the channel traces between the processor and the endpoint are good enough, which is kind of similar to what we saw with some of the, I think, B450, or X470 versus the X570 debacle. You know, AMD originally wanted to let X470 support it, and then they kept flip-flopping. So Intel has said that if the motherboard supports it, you should be able to get Gen 4 on your Z490 motherboard. So if you picked up one of those Z490 motherboards, you will be losing some of the bandwidth from DMI 3.0, but you could potentially be getting the Gen 4 PCIe out of it. And by the way, guys, if y'all have got questions, let me know down in chat. We can answer those as we're going through the stream tonight. We will be leaving this video live on the channel for its life, so let's make it a good one, right? Last thing here with the Z490 versus Z590, the B560 and the H510 motherboards, those are the lower tiered motherboards. I think one's like mainstream and the other one's like bare bones. I don't know I'm an AMD guy myself, so I'm not too familiar with Intel's nomenclature there. But they will only have the by 4 bandwidth allocated to it for these newer motherboards, which is kind of it's kind of like a slap in the face. It's like, hey, take this new chipset, but I'm not going to give you everything that's promised with it. So it's going to continue to push people towards the newer, fancier, higher-end boards. But at least, you know, with B560, you still have access to DDR4 3200. You still have access to the USB other stuff and all the other things that are attached behind the PCH. And also, lastly, the chipsets, I think for all 3 of these motherboard chipsets, they're only going to have Gen 3 PCIe coming off of the chipset. So it's kind of similar to how the AMD motherboards are. So if you've got RAID controllers, or you got other additional I/O, like if you've got additional USB controllers or additional network cards and stuff, that'll all be running at a Gen 3 speed. And of course, go and check the motherboard manufacturer website for specifics. We've actually got several motherboards we can cover and talk about later because there seems to be a bit of confusion amongst the marketplace. I'm streaming this on Monday, I think it's the 11th, the first day of CES. So, people are putting information out there, getting it out there. And I found that a couple companies are jumping the gun a little bit, but, we'll let you guys know what you see. All right, so the next topic here, let's switch back to this screen. Excuse me. The next big topic here is the 11900K versus the 10900K. Now, we alluded to it earlier in the video in the stream, and that is, why is Intel making their top tier flagship processor a 8-core part with 16 threads instead of 10 cores with 20 threads? You'd think that that would be a net negative for a part, and it seems weird to be taking a step backwards when you're trying to actually put a better product out. Well, it turns out that the way Intel is going forward with this design is they're taking their new 10 nanometer core design and they're actually backporting it to the 14 nanometer step. They actually talk about it here in the Tom's article. Let's see what it's called. I know they called backporting. Yep. Intel pairs this new backported architecture with its 14 nanometer process, touting boost speeds up to the dual core 5.3 gigahertz. Basically, what happens is by backporting this new core design into a previous manufacturing node, the design is just not small enough to actually account for the 2 additional cores, which they actually have to go in and then disable, or actually, I don't even think they're disabled. I think they're just the raw die shots show 8 cores. So they have to actually physically design in fewer cores in order to have enough space on the die size for the wafers and for it to actually fit. So we do sacrifice with the 11900K versus the 10900K, which you'd think would be a negative, but Intel, I keep having to catch myself from saying AMD, Intel is claiming an impressive 19% IPC increase, basically from going to this new architecture on the 10 nanometer node, which I find really crazy because if we go back and look at our Zen 3 review, the one where we did the 1700X, the 2700X, the 3700X, and the 5800X, we basically got to see all these IPC increases with the different core clocks or the core counts. And then when we went from Zen 2 to Zen 3, that's the 3000 series to the 5000 series, we saw a massive jump in single threaded performance as well as in multi-core performance, because the IPC increases were, I think, between 10 and 15%. Y'all can let me know down in the comments. But what I find kind of confusing here is this little chart. We showed it at the beginning here. This is what Intel, this is all Intel data here. This is not my testing data. Intel is claiming in these gaming benchmarks to get between 8% improved performance and 2% improved performance compared to the 5900X, which is running 4 additional cores compared to the 11900K. But these kind of percentage values are very small. We'll talk about performance metrics here later. That way we don't talk too low level in this brief introduction here. But these numbers are not very impressive. I mean, they're impressive because you're dropping 2 cores, you're getting more performance out of it, and you're still comparing it to a processor that's got 50% more cores. So we're going to have to check this out and see how this pans out with other games such as, not Cyberpunk, what's it called? I'm brain farting. Call of Duty Modern Warfare does really well with more cores. We've also found that, of course, Ashes of the Singularity does well with more cores. And I think Assassin's Creed was a pretty thread-heavy game too. So it's basically, we're going to have to go back and do some testing here and kind of compare the 10 core offering versus the 12 core offering from AMD versus this new 8 core offering, and to see just where, from a gaming perspective, where it lands. And also, what happens with our multi-threaded performance? You know, we loved the 10700K. It worked really well when it comes to application benchmarks and stuff. But now that we're increasing the IPC but decreasing the core count, what should we be expecting from a application perspective? I've got some theories about it. We can talk about it later in the video. But yeah, so this is the kind of performance we're going to be seeing going into the 11900K based off of what the 10900K was going to be looking like. And I'm optimistic, but at this point, I really don't care. And another thing to keep in mind, this could be just the difference between using a Gen 3 and a Gen 4 GPU. It also could be the, what's it called? The smart methodology, where they do the new direct access of the memory, the resizable bar, I think is what it's called. So it's like with these low margins, it's like you could do a number of different things to make things perform similar. So I've got some questions with the 11th series of the core processors, and we'll just have to dig into it a little bit more. One thing that was noted in the Tom's article, and they talked about it a little bit in the mobile section of the press event, was the integrated GPU. This processor is going to be having the Intel Z latest core from the graphics team over at Intel, and I think they were touting, I think it was a 50% performance improvement gen on gen, compared to the previous generation Intel graphics, which, I mean, that's great. 50% is always a great increase, but if you're only getting 10 frames per second at 720p, what's 15 FPS going to be? It's hard to translate performance percentages from a marketing team into an actual number that's going to look, and we'll talk about it again. We've got some numbers in here just for comparison purposes, and that's where I've got these performance problems. I got that written down right there. But again, guys, if y'all have got any questions, let me know in chat. We can answer them as we go through the stream. But I wanted to walk you guys through some of the different motherboards that have been teased, I guess would be the right word. If you go to the Instagram for all the motherboard manufacturers, they've basically been dropping little nuggets of info throughout the night, or throughout the day rather. And one thing I found was MSI, and this is from videocards.com. They have not really released a lot of information regarding their motherboards, which MSI is usually pretty on top of things when it comes to press releases and stuff. But I found that this company is providing the least amount, at least on the time of this stream and this recording, they're providing the least amount of information for the stream or about their products. So they are going to have their MAG Z590 Mohawk or Tomahawk motherboard, which is the next edition of the motherboard that I actually used for my testing. So it'd be a good comparison between what I tested with the 10 series, the 10th generation processors versus 11th. And they've also got a gaming carbon Wi-Fi motherboard. Let me see if they've got any others listed up here. Of course, they've got their godlike motherboard. I'm not going to be picking that one up because that's going to be probably like $500 to $600. No one's posting any MSRPs lately either, so just keep that in mind. The MSI Godlike will be a flagship eATX motherboard, and they do advertise some of the VRM configurations. This is always a sore point when it comes to picking up a motherboard, and well, how many phases does it have, or are these doubled, or are these not doubled? It's a lot of people can get really nitpicky on this, so we'll wait until we get official numbers and stuff and official specifications. Go and watch Buildzoid's videos or Gamers Nexus if you all want that kind of information. But MSI looks to be at least bringing up 3 of their popular motherboard brands. Before we go to Gigabyte, let's actually go and look at Asus. They actually have a website. If you go to their website and you click on their little link, they actually have some teasers for the different boards they have. It looks like they're only showing 4 for their main graphics, but there's actually like six motherboards, which is really cool. But unfortunately, they're all kind of the same. One thing that a lot of motherboard manufacturers like to do is use the same layout and design, and then just kind of tweak the different things that go into that design to make it a new product. So the Prime Z590 here at the very bottom, it is actually one of the few that actually has a landing page to go to, which I found interesting. Also, I like the color aesthetic of this board. But to be honest, there's not a lot of detail that Asus is putting out there. They actually do list some of the different I/O that's going to be coming off of the card. It will have 2.5 gigabit Ethernet, which is really nice. The USB Type-C, it's got an that's not an asterisk, that's a trademark sign. And Thunderbolt 4, that's going to be coming out as well. So that's really cool. But Asus doesn't have any of their tech specs listed. I imagine if you're watching this tomorrow, they might have additional information, tomorrow being the 12th. But for now, they just haven't released the actual specifications, which is, you know, that's what they can do. The other one is the ROG Strix Z590E Gaming Wi-Fi. I imagine this is going to be a very similar board to the one we've reviewed on the channel here. You can also notice that it's got the same little fan adapter slot that I wasn't too keen on, but I really love the aesthetic here. It looks like all of these motherboards are also using the completely covered motherboard, not shim, but cover board. You know what I'm talking about, the covering over all the board. Basically, this is going to be covering all your M.2s and stuff. And it's going to be cool. It's got the debug LEDs up at the top right. It doesn't look like any easily accessible buttons, though, which is kind of a shame. But, you know, this is also one of their lower-tiered motherboards. Well, it's not really lower-tiered, but it's not their premium motherboards. I don't really like their tough lines. I know a lot of people swear by them, but when I reviewed my X370, I think it might have been X470 tough, I just wasn't impressed by it, to be honest. Lastly, they've got their top 3 more premium motherboards up there. The Extreme Glacial's got the water cooling on it, if that's your thing. I imagine that it's going to be actually really, really cool to have an integrated covered VRM block. And you also get the additional power stages out of here. These are EATX, though. Those are fat boys. And then you got the Maximum Hero. That's going to be 14 plus 2. They're all actually 14 plus 2 motherboards. But unfortunately, most of these don't have specs. Oh, I forgot to mention, this one does have specifications. This is the Z590E Gaming, and it's actually got the printout. They're actually listing it going up to 5333 on the memory interface, which is crazy. But it does also state the supported data rates. And then also it starts to get into the expansion slots of what all PCIe is enabled. So remember, you're going to get 11th gen processors will have generation 4 PCIe. It'll have 16 dedicated to the graphics card, and then 4 will be dedicated to the NVMe. And that goes into this little slot right here. M.2.2 processor support PCIe. Yeah. Oh, this one. Oh, it's going to be M.2/1. This is going to be the one that only works with the 11th gen. So if you're confused about which processors are going to work in your particular motherboard and what I/O configurations you can use or storage configurations, highly recommend going and looking at some of this information. Another thing that it might have been glossed over in some of these reviews, a lot of these newer motherboards, they're going to be going with newer versions of the Realtek audio chip. So if that's important to you and you don't have an external DAC for your motherboard or for your audio amplifier, you could see some differences. I know a lot of older ones went with like the 1100 series one. I don't know. So there could be a delta there with how things sound and how things work. But for the most part, from Asus's side, still not a lot of specifications for these motherboards. You can go over here. Oh, that one's got it. I guess they're slowly trickling this stuff in. I clicked on a lot of these earlier today and they didn't show up. Maybe it's the Learn Mores that don't have pages. Yeah, go into Learn More. Stuff's broken. Yep. So I imagine tomorrow when they release all this information, you can come and check it all out. But here's what I thought was interesting. Gigabyte has a whole bunch of motherboards listed, and they're all actually clickable. And what I find interesting is they are putting a huge emphasis on their Vision line. This is their more creator-friendly ones. Kind of looks like the NZXT versions, but they've got the Vision, the Ultra Durables, the Aorus brand. You know, if y'all aren't familiar with Aorus, highly recommend you go and learn about it because that's their gaming brand. But basically, they got the Aorus Elite, the Aorus Ultra, the Aorus Master, and the Aorus Extreme. I've only taken a couple samples of this stuff. Basically, the Vision D, which looks really clean. The Elite, it looks okay. The one I like the most myself is the Aorus Master. I was a huge fan of the fin grid array that's on top of the VRMs. And then, of course, they also have the integrated coverings over the M.2s and stuff. Again, this one's only using the ALC 1220. So keep that in mind if audio is interesting for you guys. Some of these new motherboards are going to be using different audio chipsets. So, keep that in mind if that's something that's important to you. 18+1 for that VRM. This isn't a motherboard. I don't need to go into it. But yeah, so basically, if you wanted to learn more about the Z590 motherboards, I highly recommend you guys go and check out Gigabyte's different web pages. They've got all the pictures, the galleries, all the specifications, at least right now. And if you wanted to learn more about the motherboards, I highly recommend checking them out, especially the specification page, because that's going to help you trying to figure out like what's connected where and if your NVMe drive is going to be at the right speed and stuff, especially if you've got, like I said, some of these Sabrent rockets. This is the 1 terabyte Generation 4, and it's pretty good. I'm actually running it right now. So I'm trying to see if there's some reliability or sustainability, longevity stuff, sorry. So that is all the motherboards I have seen. I think I might have actually just gotten an ASRock press release. I'll have to go and check that. Y'all can probably check my Twitter out over at the Turk. I'll be talking about it as we go through CES Day 2 tomorrow. But I think, at least from a high level, at least for our 11th gen Intel processors, I think we got a lot of good stuff coming our way. We've got DDR4 3200 having official support, which I find is really nice, especially for people that are going to be building with some of the slower memory speed or the lower end chipsets. I'm sorry, because I know like if you've got the 10400F, I think it's a value processor, but it's only clocked at 2666, I think. So, or that chipset. So going to this newer processor, maybe we're going to be able to get higher memory speeds, which will definitely help out some of the lower budgeted tiered systems. Quad G34, what's going on? Thank you for coming to the stream. But we're also getting, finally, from Intel, we're getting the PCIe Gen 4, which will help enable people that have gotten the latest graphics cards from NVIDIA or, the previous generation and the latest generations from AMD. But then what's shocking, and I think the most important, and that's what we're going to get into now, is the actual performance we're expecting to see out of these latest processors, because the 11900K, that's the top tier, at least for now, the top tier chip from Intel. It's only going to have 8 cores and 16 threads, which we're losing 2 cores right off the top, and it's clocked at the same speed. So I've actually got a chart here, and we can look at all the different performance metrics. Let me throw this up real quick. I hope it's this one. Yeah, there we go. Cool. So this is my data that I use for when I'm making all of my presentations and stuff for the YouTube. And this is just my straight raw data. And I've basically got here kind of a performance preview of what we should expect from the 11900K. At least from an 8-core perspective, because, I've never gotten myself a 10900K because I don't want to spend that kind of money on a processor that I don't need. I've got a 5900X. I've got a 3950 right here. So it's like, I don't need to buy a new processor just for review. But what I find interesting here is The claimed performance improvement, let's actually, before we do that, let's throw this back on screen real quick. So these are the performance improvements Intel is expecting us to see going into the 11th gen processors. And we're seeing anywhere between 8% performance improvement versus 2% performance improvement. So not a lot here. And this is compared to the 5900X. Getting all my numbers and names mixed up. So going back to the data, here at the bottom, we've got the 10700K. Now this is the 8-core processor from Intel in the previous generation. And what I find troubling is if the 10900K got certain amount of performance, then we increased the IPC by going to this new processor core, I think something Cove, right? But then we lose 2 cores in order to get the cores to actually fit on the die. That translates into a between 2 and 8% performance improvement, which I find really troubling because if I really liked my 10700K, why would I upgrade to that new processor? And then at the same time, unless we know more about pricing and stuff, why would I upgrade or not get a 3700X? Because like, look here, in the Warhammer Dawn of War, this is a very CPU-centric benchmark at 1080p. I'm getting 137 FPS. Granted, that's the wrong number because that's what the my RTX 3080. This one right here, my 3700X. This is the one of the older Zen 2 8-core processors. It's 128 FPS at 1080p. If I bump up to the Zen 2 based one, I get 156, which is pretty good. But I also get that same number from the previous generation Intel part. So why do we go with the 11th series processor? I don't know. I can hit DDR4, at least on a Z490 board. I can hit DDR4. I don't get Gen 4 PCIe, though I've got a video here on the channel saying Gen 4 is not that impressive, at least for a consumer. And then, you know, some of these other offerings from AMD are just really nice. So it's like, even on a CPU-heavy gaming benchmark, I don't see why you would want to do that. So let's take a look at another game real quick. So that was what? Dawn of War. So I don't have complete metrics because I honestly haven't touched my Intel machine in quite a while. So I only have a few different games. I do have, I think, Ashes. Yeah, we got Ashes the Singularity. Yep, down there. Okay, cool. So this is Shadow of the Tomb Raider. This is one of the heavily requested games by, excuse me, one of the big CPU-based games that AMD was touting way back in the day when they were doing their press releases and stuff. So here we go. We've got, let me know if y'all can see my mouse. But the 3700X, this is the previous generation Zen 2 based processor versus the Zen 3 based processors at 1080p with high settings. And then going to the 10th gen 8-core processor, 1066. So if I get 3% on that, 3% of 166 FPS is almost 6 frames per second. So it's not that impressive, right? Of course, going into a higher end GPU, this is the RTX 3080 data I've collected as well. We do get to see the delta quite a bit there. So 4% of 234 would be 4%. So 10% would be 20 FPS, right? So drop that in half, you'd get 10. So we would bump up to 240, right? So maybe you could finally up and play Shadow of the Tomb Raider on your fancy 240 hertz monitor. To me, that's not a big deal. I would be perfectly fine running at 1080p on my 144 hertz monitor. At that point, why spend the extra $500 on a processor? Maybe you're doing esports, and maybe that's just a use case I haven't captured. So, you know, again, it's like, I don't see the justification of going with the the newer processor. That's Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Let's take a look at GTA. I might not have... Oh, I do have all this data. Because sometimes my settings are all mixed up and whatnot. But here's GTA 5. This is, again, CPU-based benchmark. We do see, as we go to the newer processors, again, this is the 5900X, 180 FPS, 5800X. Check out that video to get why it's in air quotes. We get 180. And even if we go with the 3080 for the GPU, we don't get any extra performance out of it. So we are CPU limited here. Going up an extra 4%, what does that get you? I mean, I don't, going back to this picture here, I just don't see the justification. I get that Intel wants to get the gaming crowd, but I know a lot of reviewers, when they're going to get these processors, they're going to be like, it's not that impressive. Why would I buy a Z590 motherboard and a brand new processor when I can get the same stuff probably for cheaper from AMD? And that's, I think, going to be the biggest picture going forward is the price. It's always the most important thing, right? But moving right along, let's see if we got another game real quick. I don't want to beat the horse too much here, because the story's not going to change. Let's see if we've got... Let's do Red Dead, because that's another... Actually, no, let's do Ashes, because I think we saw a pretty sizable delta with Ashes of the Singularity going between the different core counts, frequencies, and generations of the CPUs. So here we've got the 3700X. I didn't collect Crazy, so let's turn off Crazy preset. I think I can do it here. Nope. Pardon me while I click some buttons. I love pivot tables. I'm an engineer by trade. I do this kind of stuff all the time. And I like having all this data just like readily accessible so I don't have to go farting around through files and stuff to find the data I need. It's all here. I just got to click the right buttons to get it there. But there we go. Ashes of the Singularity, 1080p. This is with all three of the processors in question today. Down here at the bottom is our Intel 10700K. This is the 8-core. And again, highlighting the issue here, we've got a 19% IPC improvement, but by dropping 2 cores between the 10900K and the 5900X, the delta is only between 2 and 8% as according to Intel here. If we take the 5900X with Ashes of the Singularity at high, we're at 137 FPS. At 10700K, maybe that's the delta here, going between the 5900X and the new 8-core King. That could be a sizable delta, because right there, that's what, 14 FPS. If you add an additional 4% on top of that, you're sitting right at around, 145 frames per second. So maybe that's something that would be good for you guys, and it might mean getting a better processor for gaming. And to be honest, if you go with the faster graphics card as well, you see improved performance as well. So that is Ashes of the Singularity. And, we see that might be one of the best cases of why you would want to get that particular game. I don't have Doom Eternal data on all this, I don't think. Let me see if I got some Doom Eternal data. Yeah, shoot. Sometimes these charts don't like to show up if you've gotten certain stuff clicked off. Yeah. Because we only game at Ultra Nightmare on that bad boy. So yeah, if we go... Sorry if I'm clicking that out of your screen there. There we go. So if you go with Ultra Nightmare with an RTX 3080 at 1080p, you could be seeing 350 FPS. So at these settings, you don't need the additional FPS in my opinion. So what does this all boil down to? I think Intel has done a pretty good job of trying to update their processors into a more current version of the processor. So now that they're directly comparable with AMD, at least from a generational PCIe support, they also have the lanes to support it with the PCIe, which is really good. And they've finally gotten their memory interfaces to officially support DDR4 3200 right out of the box. We'll have to get additional information maybe tomorrow with the other press releases that are coming out from Intel and all the different motherboard manufacturers. But if we can get DDR4 3200 on all of the lower end 500 series motherboard chipsets, I think that would be a great thing for value-based builders. You know, if you've got that 10400F or whatever, finally getting access to the faster memory speeds will only help you in some of those games that are memory dependent. And then you've got the integrated GPU. I don't know if that's important to you. I think there's like all-time open quick sync available. There's all sorts of different software-based features that are going to be included with your Intel processors as well. So after seeing this press release and the keynote from Intel, would I buy an 11th gen processor? Probably not. I don't see the added benefit from previous generations of Intel or previous generations of AMD that would necessitate buying either the Z490 motherboard or the latest processors from Intel. I just think some of the previous generations ones will have more value in them, and some of the features just aren't required. But, you know, that's just my initial impression. That's me going through the specifications and some of the performance metrics I've collected in the past. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. I think we're going to end the video here for the regular YouTube video. We'll chop it up afterwards. And then we'll keep talking CES. So thank you guys for watching the video. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. Also, comment down below what other companies you guys want me to talk to at CES. I've been trying to get a hold of AData, Kingston, HyperX. There's a gaming chair company I want to talk to. I want to talk to iBuyPower. There's a whole bunch of other ones. Let me know down below who you want me to go and talk to. But thank you guys for watching. Hope you all have a great night, Turk Force. We'll catch you tomorrow. We've got the AMD press keynote tomorrow. We've got several other cool keynotes. It's like tomorrow is like the real first day of CES. So thank you again for watching. Hope you all have a great night. Take care, guys. All right. I think that's it. How long did we stream? 48 minutes? That's not bad. So we're going to keep streaming, guys. This is